Hey, chat. You know who I haven't checked in on in a while? Our good buddy Max. We haven't checked in on Max in a bit. Hold on. Oh, is that? Okay, hang on a second. I see we're being a bit... Oh, the alignment's off all over the place. Hold on. The alignment's off on this window a lot, actually. There we go. I think that might have that solved the problem exactly. Yay. Yay for fixing problems on the fly. Yeah, the little you got eagle eyes for that, Tapper. Yeah, the friggin' the Jirachi that's there. What is this one? Feeding the Papal Conclave. I'm very interested to see what that entails. Shall we? Let's.
After a pope dies, there is a process to elect a new pope called the conclave. Essentially, all of the cardinals are locked away until they vote on a new pope. But they still gotta eat. And historically, that has been quite the process. A process I'll tell you about as I make this dish of ribs served at one of the most infamous conclaves in history. So thank you to Wildgrain for sponsoring this video.
Okay, that looks real good though. Hold on.
This time on Tasting History.
That looks real good though. Hold up. What? Yo.
Clausi cum clave, or closed with a key. That is where the term conclave comes from, because the cardinals are actually locked away until they can decide on which of them is going to be the next pope. And the process has changed a little bit over the centuries, but much of it is still the same. But one aspect that has definitely changed is the food that is served to them. Today, the cardinals are fed modern meals, like in 2013, they received meals of soup, spaghetti, small meat kebabs, and boiled vegetables.
Oh, wow.
And those meals were prepared by nuns. But in the 16th century, there was an entire army of cooks dedicated to feeding them, and they were led by one of the world's first celebrity chefs, Bartolomeo Scappi. And in his cookbook, known as the Opera, he detailed the preparations made for the conclave of 1549. Now, today, the business of the conclave takes place in the Sistine Chapel.
No worries, Pip. Have a good day.
In 1549, it took place in the nearby Pauline Chapel, as the Sistine Chapel was being used as a dormitory for some of the cardinals. This and several other rooms around the Sistine Chapel were partitioned off with wood partitions that were draped in green or purple cloth. And then inside of these 16.5 by 16.5 foot rooms, the cardinals were sequestered, and they would have a bed and a few other accoutrements, but it was pretty sparse. And for the most part, they ate all of their meals
that is very
cells.
sparse.
They did not eat together for most of the conclave. Rather, they would have stewards bring food from the kitchens to the cells. And they would bring them in these hampers, which carried hot food from the kitchen, and then there was a tub that was filled with cold food from the credenza. And since Scappi's opera has all of the recipes that would have been served to the cardinals,
that's generally really neat.
I decided to choose one for this episode. But I was barred from many of them because the conclave took place during winter. So basically there were no fresh fruits or vegetables, and that X's out a lot of the recipes, and I also decided to steer away from some of the harder to find meats like porcupine, cow eyes, and peacock. Instead, I opted for paper.
Hold on!
That X's out a lot of the recipes.
Hold on!
I also decided to steer away from some of the harder to find meats like porcupine.
Porcupine's weird enough. And then it gets weirder from there.
Cow eyes, and
Why the eyes specifically? Why just the eyes? There's literally a whole cow's worth of meat there. Why just the eyes? What?
And peacock, and instead.
Also, why peacock? I have too many questions, Dad.
Instead, I opted for papal baby back ribs, as Scappi includes instructions for different ways to cook the back ribs of a domestic pig. If the pig is young, the ribs can be roasted on the spit with the rind or without, and with onions split in the pan, which are cooked with the fat that drips from the meat as it cooks. And before it is put on the spit, it is sprinkled with salt and ground coriander seed. You could also let the ribs stand in a marinade of vinegar, grape must syrup, garlic cloves, and coriander, and then cook it on the spit in the above way, serving it hot with a sauce on top made of the same seasoning.
That generally sounds really good, though.
Optional variants like adding rosemary or cutting up the ribs before cooking them in a sort of pile and then putting sour orange juice on top. But I am going for the marinade and the sauce.
Hell yeah.
What I am having to do is slightly alter the way that it was actually cooked because I don't have a spit nor an open flame here in my kitchen, so I'm going to be making them in the oven. And an oven is a wonderful way to cook ribs, as it is also a wonderful way to cook the many baked goods that I have been receiving from today's sponsor, Wild Grain. Wild Grain is the first bake from frozen. Wildgrain.com. That's on me. So yeah, for this recipe, what you'll need is 1 rack of pork baby back ribs, 2 or 3 small onions, 1 tablespoon of salt, 3 teaspoons of coriander divided. 1 will be for the rub, 1 for the marinade, and 1 for the sauce. And then also for the marinade, you will need 2 or 3 cloves of garlic, 1 teaspoon of red wine vinegar, and 1 tablespoon of mostokoto, or grape must syrup. Scappi actually uses the term mostokoto, but today it's very often found under the term sapa or saba. And they actually use this even in ancient Rome under the term de frutum. And it's wonderful. It's sweet and it's tangy, and it's basically just grape must that is boiled down into a syrup. It's fantastic.
That sounds kind of fantastic, honestly.
Garlic, coriander, grape must, mostokoto, and vinegar for the sauce, but we will visit that later on. So first, if your ribs do still have the silver skin membrane on the back of the ribs,
you are going to want to take that off.
It's not going to hurt you if you eat it, but it's kind of an unpleasant texture. So just pry it away with a knife, sometimes easier said than done, but once you get it up, you can pull it off.
You need a sharp-ass paring knife for that.
And you'll get a better grip. Then sprinkle on some of the salt, rubbing it in, as well as some of the coriander, and then flip the ribs and do the same on the backside. Then prepare the marinade by crushing the garlic into a bowl and then adding 1 teaspoon of the coriander, the red wine vinegar, and that tablespoon of mostokoto. Whisk this all together and then pour it over the rack of ribs, front and back, brushing it all over. And once both sides are coated, wrap the ribs tightly in the foil and set them in the refrigerator to marinate overnight. And then when you are ready to actually cook them, unwrap them from the foil and then chop the onions into quarters and place them beneath the rack of ribs. And rewrap the foil tightly around them and set them on a baking sheet with a wire rack. These then go into the oven at the rather low temperature of 275 degrees Fahrenheit, 135 Celsius, for 2.5 to 3 hours.
That checks.
Slow and slow to get the best texture. And you want to just
the best way to do it.
Fully cooked by having the meat fall off the bone. And at that point, the ribs are done. But better to emulate the open fires in Scappi's kitchen, I stuck mine without the foil under the broiler for about 2 or 3 minutes, and that just gave a nice darkening to the top of the ribs.
Nice.
Now these ribs would have been something served to the Cardinals at that conclave in 1549, provided the Cardinals were behaving. Because if they weren't behaving, they would only get bread and water. And that was something left over from the very first conclave several hundred years earlier. A conclave which lasted for 3 years.
Yes! Okay. Now we're getting to the real cool, interesting shit. That was the longest time the Catholic Church went without a pope. That conclave lasted for 3 fucking years. They couldn't make up their mind for anything. Holy shit.
The year was 1268, and Pope Clement IV had just died in the city of Viterbo, which at the time was the seat of papal power since Rome was deemed too dangerous. So, as was tradition, the College of Cardinals gathered in the city to elect one of their own as the new pope. Unfortunately, they all hated each other. Or more accurately, the leaders who they were kind of beholden to, they hated each other. That would have been the Holy Roman Empire, which was actually leaderless at the time, and the King of Naples, Charles of Anjou, who was a member of the French royal family. So on December 1st, 1268, 19 cardinals gathered in Viterbo to elect a new pope. 11 were beholden to the empire, and 8 were beholden to the French.
Here we go.
The empire and the French had each given them a list of who they could and could not vote for, and there was no overlap between the two lists. So from the start, they were at a stalemate. Now at this time, the voting was done very differently than it is today. they would gather, they would chat, they would have a vote, and then they would go home to wherever they lived, which was essentially a palace. And then they wouldn't meet again for a few days, a few weeks, just whenever they wanted to.
That's very different.
So they were living a rather cushy life and were not in a big rush to make a decision. But the people of Viterbo, they wanted a new pope. So they decided...
Oh my god, Polly. Another fun fact, there was one conclave that was taking a while, and some cardinal commented sarcastically to the secular official, well, maybe the Holy Spirit can't hear us. The secular official's response was to remove the roof from the building. He and his workers tear down the roof so that the Holy Spirit could, in fact, hear them, and the conclave ended later that day. Wow! Amazing. Chat, for the record, the latest papal conclave that just happened, they got that shit done in 2 days. That's super efficient now, if you ask me. Like, holy god.
To lock the cardinals inside of the papal palace. This was in late 1269, about a year after the whole thing had begun.
Yep.
And so they locked them in the palace cum clave, or with a key. That turned into conclave or conclave. Now you would think that being sequestered would hurry up the process. They would be uncomfortable, but it did not. They were still too comfortable, and time kept going on. And so finally the people said, okay, then you don't get to eat. We're cutting your food down to 1 dish a day. That still didn't work, so then they cut their food down to just bread and water.
Oh my
God. That's all they got. Surely that worked. Except no. Well, by June 1270, a whole year and a half after this thing began, Cardinal John of Toledo made a comment, supposedly in jest, that they couldn't make a decision because they were locked inside, and so the Holy Spirit couldn't get to them.
There it is.
So that's how it works.
There it is, Polly.
Couldn't get to them, and so they had to be either let out of conclave or have the roof torn off of the palace. Well, the people decided to tear the roof off the palace. So now the cardinals are sequestered, they're not eating very well, and they are out in the elements pretty much all of the time. So surely now they had to come to a compromise and make a decision, right? No, it still took quite a bit longer. It wasn't until September of 1271, almost 3 years after the last pope had died, that they finally agreed that they couldn't make a decision. So instead, they had 6 of their own get together to form a subcommittee, and they would make the decision. And still, they could not decide which of them was going to be the next pope.
Oh my goodness.
So finally, they all decided to elect someone who wasn't even there, who wasn't even a cardinal. His name was Teobaldo Visconti. He wasn't even ordained, and on top of that, he was off in the Holy Land on the 9th Crusade with the future King Edward I of England.
Oh my God!
That far, it took a few months before he even learned that he had been elected Pope. Must have come as quite the shock, kind of a King Ralph situation, if anyone remembers that movie.
Oh my
and then
Lord.
It took a few more months for him to get back to Italy, back to Rome, where finally he could be ordained, because he still wasn't ordained, then made a bishop, and then he could be crowned Pope. And on March 19th, 1272, a full 40 months after the previous Pope had died, he was indeed made Pope Gregory X. So with 40 months
oh my God, that was Pope Gregory? Wow!
First acts as Pope was to issue a papal bull known as Ubi Periculum, and this was a way to set up the rules of the next conclave, and it was meant to make it rather uncomfortable. Essentially, 9 days after the death of the previous pope, the conclave would begin in whatever city the pope had died in. Then the cardinals would be locked away. They would all sleep in one big room divided by curtains, and they weren't allowed to have meetings with each other unless all of them were present. They would have no communication with the outside world unless all of the cardinals agreed. So basically, only if someone inside died, got really sick, or if they elected a new pope. As for food, it would be delivered through the wall via a sort of turnstile, and all it would be
Pope Gregory, I'm gonna make some new rules because this was some bullshit. Yeah.
And after 5 days, this was reduced to just bread, water, and a little wine. But perhaps the most motivating aspect of these conclave rules was that during the process, the cardinals were not allowed to get any income from their cardinalship. So that was
yes.
motivating. And guess what?
Yes, the great motivator. Money. Unbelievable.
It worked, because when Gregory X died, the next conclave was over in just a day. Unfortunately, this next pope, Innocent V, died after just a few months, and they had 3 more popes over the course of the next year.
Oh
my
God.
They just kept dying. And one of those popes got rid of these new rules of conclave.
Oh.
I guess because it was just too uncomfortable.
Oh, no.
But then, a couple decades later, there was yet another stalemate of 2 years, not as long as the first, but almost. And after that, Pope Boniface, or Boniface, reinstituted the rules of conclave, which were still mostly in effect in 1549 at the conclave that Scappi writes about.
That's crazy.
And he has a section in his opera entitled The Funeral of Pope Paul III and the Subsequent Conclave.
Gregory in his grave, oh, for fuck's sake.
to relate the sumptuous arrangements adopted in 1549 for the funeral of Paul III, along with the number of cardinals living at that time, which amounted to 58. The ones who entered the conclave and the ones who came along to it after it was closed. And the ones who came out sick and who died.
The latest one was like almost 90?
Who had the keeping
there were a
of
lot.
The conclave. In his writing, he details how they lived and how they were fed, paying special attention to the fact that they were meant to be cut off from the outside world. All of the cardinals were put in just a few rooms, including the Sistine Chapel, and everything was draped in either purple or green fabric. You got purple fabric if the pope that had just died had appointed you as cardinal, and if it had been a previous pope, then you got green fabric. Then they had their 2 large boxes for food. And Scappi includes not only images of these boxes, but also images of the stewards carrying them from the kitchens. Scappi says that the cardinals received 2 meals a day, and they would be served one at a time. Essentially, a list was made up the night before, putting all of the cardinals in order, and it was random, except that the sick ones went on top. And then that next day, that was the order that they would be fed in. And so their stewards would go into the kitchen and fill up the hamper, and it would all be tested for poison there in the kitchen. Once it was tested, then it would be brought into another room where there was a table of bishops or prelates in charge of the conclave, and there a messenger would announce the name of the cardinal whose food was being presented. Then came the steward with 4 or 6 squires carrying
medieval TSA inspection,
with all sorts of wine and pure water. The decanters were all covered with oranges and flowers, and had labels on which were written the variety and quality of the wines. Then came 2 footmen carrying the large tub with the credenza foods.
That's so fucking wild. Holy cow.
2 more footmen carrying the hamper.
That's
then the
wild.
food and drink would be laid
out
out before the prelates and the bishops and tested again, but not for poison this time, but rather for messages trying to get inside of the conclave. So they would pick at it with a fork, pick through all the food. And that's why Scappi says it was not possible to send in closed pies or whole chickens, since those were cut open in the presence of the bishops. Nor could anyone send in wine in a container other than glass, nor napkins, cloths, or anything else that had not been first opened and examined. Any remaining food was distributed to the servants of the conclave, that is, barbers, masons, carpenters, apothecaries, cleaners, and various other servants. Service was done this way, evening and morning. And now, after all of the food had been presented to the bishops and prelates and picked through, then it could be said.
I genuinely felt the same way when John Paul II died, because at that point I was way more it's not that I'm not entirely not Christian or Catholic now, but I was, more regular with my faith back in the day. But yeah, I get what you're coming from, though. I get what you're coming from.
Sent inside to the cardinals, and it would be sent via something called the ruota del conclave, which was a sort of turntable that would spin to deliver the food inside of the chapel.
Oh, that's clever.
Should we take Scappi at his word, then it would seem that the conclave of 1549 followed the rules to a T. But we know from many, many other writings that the conclave of 1549 was actually one of the most public and absolutely rule-breaking conclaves in history, at least documented. As one letter from the time said, all the rules governing the election of the Pope have been broken. All the customs set aside, oaths broken, order perverted. Ceremonies foregone.
That's so funny.
The conclave is conducted in public, and no good can come from the assembly. That was a letter written to Charles V, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. And really, the entire conclave, which ran from the end of November 1549 to early February 1550, was a sort of proxy war between Charles V and his rival, King Henry II of France. Each ruler had their chosen candidates, and they were going to make sure that their man won the vote.
Yep,
it's literally the same setup as the conclave a few centuries earlier. Nothing had changed except for the actual players. Pretty much from the start, the rules were being
History repeats itself.
One of the things was that each cardinal could only have one person with them, like one servant, and this quickly turned into
Tapper. I wonder why Jirachi, like, what's the connection between the mythical wish Pokemon and the Pope? I think it's because Jirachi's head kind of looks like the Pope's mitre, like the hat that the Pope and the bishops and the cardinals wear. That's how I see it, at least. That's how I see it.
The 3, but then after a while, we know that most of them had like 6, 7, 8 people with them the whole time. There were also letters going back and forth.
Let's be real, Pope's got drip. Oh my God.
Different rulers in Europe with details about all the things that were happening inside of the supposedly closed conclave. There was even one time where a brother of one of the cardinals was sent with a letter from the French king, and he was allowed inside the conclave.
What?
And he wouldn't leave for weeks. They tried to get him out, and he just wouldn't leave. Probably because he was also sent with a letter, a promissory note, promising 150,000 golden coins that could be used for bribes in general, just to make sure that the cardinals voted the king's way.
Oh my God, just imagine that, like crashing a papal conclave to bribe the cardinals to vote for a certain cardinal. That's funny. Holy shit.
But the emperor also sent in bribes, so at least they were on an even playing field.
That's hilarious.
The inner workings of the conclave became so public that even the common people knew what was going on. And so the bookies of Rome started taking bets on how the next vote would go. They had that much information that they could adjust the odds on an almost daily basis. There was a letter from the Venetian ambassador that said, "It is more than clear that the merchants are very well informed about the state of the poll, and that the cardinals' attendants in conclave go partners."
Who just hit my throne? When did this? At 8 o'clock? How the fuck? Whoomst? Hello? What? Who contributed to the Switch 2 fund? How dare you? Oh my God, really? Who the heck? Mecha. You absolute gremlin. Thank you. Holy shit. You absolute gremlin. Thank you. Oh my goodness. You didn't have to do that, but I appreciate it. Thank you. Holy moly.
With them in wagers,
oh my gosh,
which thus causes many tens of thousands scudi to change hands. On December 28th, those who were running the conclave,
I'll never get tired of the surprise whoomst,
decided to lay down the law.
Like a final loot drop IRL. Yeah, no kidding.
They started boarding up the windows so there was no air or natural light coming in, and they reduced the amount of food that the cardinals were getting.
I'm sorry, Polly, what? Pope John XII was the last pope from the period known as the pornocracy? No, that can't be real. That cannot be real. No, there's no way. What? I have to look that up now. Hold on. I have to look that up now. Overly Sarcastic Productions did an entire video about it? What the fuck? I'm gonna have to check that out later. Oh my god, that's wild. Hi, Erica. You've come at a time. The pornocracy was just the Discord. I will check on that later. Thank you. Erica, you've joined at a time. My goodness. Oh my god, Lisa, go eat. Holy cow.
For a while, a few of the Cardinals started to get sick, and they blamed it on the lack of fresh air and good food, and so they went back to the way that it had been, and nothing really changed.
Oh my god.
By January, a messenger of Emperor Charles wrote that the election of the Pope is going from bad to worse, and it appears that the Cardinals have sworn to die in conclave rather than change their minds and correct their impious counsels.
Oh my goodness.
8 days later, on January 31st, that is exactly what happened.
What?
Cardinal Niccolò Ridolfi, one of the frontrunners in the vote, died, and immediately there were accusations of poisoning. And so this led to an autopsy, and the person doing the autopsy declared, yeah, this guy was most definitely poisoned.
Wow.
And so that did lead to an actual crackdown on the Cardinals. They were really sequestered. People were kicked out. They couldn't get together, and they had to stay in their little cubicles from 10:30 at night until sunrise. They were basically treated like children.
Wow.
But it worked. Because finally, on February 6th, acting on orders from the king and the emperor, or rather kind of a lack of orders from the emperor, but anyway, the Cardinals decided, all right, let's just choose someone that none of us likes. And that was the least offensive answer to the problem. It was Cardinal Giovanni del Monte who took on the name Pope Julius III.
Ah, Pope Julius. Also, R2, that's exactly why I'm... Okay. That's exactly why I love the idea of a community media share night, but also dread it, because I'm going to have to set some very strict ground rules for that, because I know how unhinged y'all are.
And later, both sides agreed that he was, and I quote, incompetent, unworthy, and pernicious. Now today, while the conclave is still fraught with politics,
oh my God,
it is
Erica.
not the same as it used to be, probably because the Pope no longer has access to like a standing army. So the stakes are a little bit different.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that the conclave has changed all that much. The timing has changed, and they are a little bit more lax about the rules, but many of the aspects still do apply. Though I definitely think that the food has changed quite a bit.
Agreed.
Because I don't think that anyone at the conclave will be eating these Scappi baby back ribs. Now, once your ribs are ready, out of the oven, you can go ahead and make your sauce. It's the same ingredients as the marinade, though I opted for a little less garlic, just 1 clove, along with a teaspoon of coriander. And since the sauce is not going in the oven, I wanted to cook it just a bit to mellow the garlic flavor, so I added a little oil and set it over medium heat just until the garlic was fragrant, and then I added a tablespoon of red wine vinegar and about 3 or 4 tablespoons of that delicious sweet mostacotto. I let that simmer for 2 minutes and then poured it over the ribs, which should be served alongside the onion. And here we are, the pork back ribs served to the Cardinals during the conclave of 1549. Wow! I just love the look of a rack of ribs.
Hell yeah.
Ribs are one of my favorite foods. Give them a try here.
That looks real fucking tasty. Yeah.
Perfection. Messy, but perfection. Just get this big piece here. 1 second.
I would have done the same thing, Max. Don't worry.
The flavor is just, it's wonderful. Because...
Oh, yeah. I would have sucked that bone clean. Are you kidding me?
Onion, but neither of them are overpowering.
That's gonna get clipped. Fuck. God damn it. Oh, I'm moving on.
And you get
I'm moving on before somebody gets the chance to clip that. God damn it.
And
God damn it.
The vinegar. But it's not vinegary, it's not tangy, and it's not too sweet. Like, it's not like a barbecue sauce where it can be very sweet, which I like barbecue sauce. But it's like a Poco barbecue sauce. The flavor is so complex. They are tender. They're not slathered in the sauce. You could make more, I guess, but really I do feel like this is closer to what it would be. What I want to taste though, is the actual onion. I had somebody make me this knife, and it is actually based off of a knife in Scappi, which I think is really cool.
Oh, that's cool as shit.
I love onions. Here we go. I can just eat actually just a plate of the onions.
Yeah.
It's so sweet. It's like lost any of that kind of bite that the onion has, and it's just sweet.
Yeah, because they've been roasted for so goddamn long. That's rather nice.
So one thing I wanted to show you is this. This is a replica, obviously, of the key that opens the Sistine Chapel. And I got it when I went to the Vatican a couple months ago, and I did something called the Keymaster Tour.
Whoa!
Which was one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. You show up at the Vatican before anyone else is there, and it's a small group of just 20 people. You go into the Vatican with the person who opens all of the doors, and you get to open the doors, and they got tons of keys, and you get to
that's
be
so
in the Vatican
cool!
Essentially alone. It's hard to get tickets. I was like checking the website for months every single day because they.
I kind of want to do that now. Actually, that's really neat.
But it's so worth it. Keymaster Tour. If you only have a little bit of time to see the Vatican, it's a good way because you don't have to deal with any crowds. It's literally 20 people. Anyway, make these.
That's really nice. Holy cow! I gotta try that. I gotta try that now. I gotta see if I can get tickets to that. Fucking hell.